Now, the Dartford crossing remains blocked for a second day as a Just Stop Oil protest continues. The QE2 bridge, which links Kent and Essex, has been closed since it was scaled by two climbers from the group on Monday. So the climate activist group wants the government to, well, we all know what they want, halt all new oil and gas licences and consents as well, and says that the climbers will stay on top of the bridge until they are brought down, which I think maybe I speak for everyone when I say I hope is never. Meanwhile, around 30 activists also caused traffic disruption in West London this morning, blocking a main road during rush hour. These are just the latest in a series of Just Stop Oil protests that have been taking place over the last couple of weeks. Let's get more on this now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's in West London. Mark, good to have you back. I've been seeing you for a little while on my show. So, yes, what's the latest with Just Stop Oil? They're still being a nuisance.
Yeah, they are, and they say they're going nowhere anytime soon. They say that as far as their action is concerned, they will only stop their protests when the government decides to stop issuing more oil and gas licences. And given that there is a fat chance that that's going to happen, then I'm afraid we're in this for the long haul. And what the long haul has meant so far this month anyway is protests taking place in and around London and, of course, in Dartford pretty much every day. We had one here on the A4 this morning, this busy arterial route into central London, blocked for some 2 hours, 50 plus police officers out here once again having to deal with these protesters. Shocking. And tied up for 2 hours as they got those protesters unglued from the roadway, uncoupled from each other and into the backs of police vans. They would much rather, the police of course, they would much rather be out in their own boroughs policing London, dealing with the very significant rise in violent crime over recent years.
Well, exactly.
But instead they're tied up and dealing with these protesters who say they're going to continue this action, Patrick.
Yeah, exactly, Mark. And I've been seeing a lot more videos online of members of the public either A, prepared to take matters into their own hands, which I think we can all agree could have some potentially quite dangerous consequences going forward, which you wouldn't like to see. But people are getting increasingly frustrated from what I can see, Mark. No doubt the police are getting increasingly frustrated as well. When Insulate Britain were in their pomp, as it were, eventually they stopped because a few of them, well, became Insulate Prison, didn't they? Is there any chance of this happening with Just Stop Oil, do you think?
Well, that's certainly what the Home Secretary is hoping for. New legislation is being issued to amendments to the bill that's going through the Houses of Parliament at the moment, the Public Order Bill, with a view to getting stiffer penalties for those involved in these protests, because at the moment, of course, the crimes that they're committing are fairly minor in the scheme of things. Blocking the King's Highway, that kind of obstruction and direct action can lead to fines, but effectively it's a revolving door of being arrested, processed and let out within hours just to go back and commit the same kind of offences again. That's why the Home Secretary wants to introduce those injunctions that we saw working eventually quite well with Insulate Britain, whereby it was a more serious offence that they were committing because injunctions were put in place. They continue to break these injunctions, and of course that is a more serious offence in breach of a court-imposed injunction, and it meant the courts then had the power to jail these protesters. Eventually they did jail dozens of protesters, and it appeared certainly to have an effect on Insulate Britain. But now, of course, Insulate Britain have died down, but what do we have? We've got other groups like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion popping up again and carrying out the same kind of direct action. This protest obviously taking place in Dartford, still ongoing.
Yeah.
That will only end when the two people on the bridge decide to get tired and cold and hungry and they want to get down. That's the only time that's going to end.